March 15, 2011, the start of the Syrian civil war. Every man, woman, and child for themselves against Bashar al-Assad's army. April 2011, the beginning of a world crisis. That month, up to 5,000 refugees fled their homes in Syria for the hopes of a safer life. And just 1 year later, April 6, 2012, over 2,500 Syrians crossed the border into Turkey in just one day, the highest ever recorded at the time. July 18, 2012, a bomb explodes in Damascus, killing President Bashar al-Assad's brother-in-law and other high-ranking security officials. Anywhere from 18,000 to 40,000 Syrian refugees crossed the Masna'a border post into Lebanon over the next few days. Summer 2013, the United Nations High Commissioner announced an average 6,000 people a day are fleeing conflict in Syria. On September 3, 2013, UNICEF released a tweet saying, 1 year ago today, the number of Syrian refugees was 230,000. It is now 2 million, half like children. Just a few days later, the crisis has officially been recognized in Europe. On September 11, 2013, Germany agrees to resettle 5,000 Syrian refugees, the largest program at the time. Over the next few months, there is a European movement to find a place for the fleeing refugees, who have found no hope in Syria's surrounding countries. And on April 3, 2014, 3 years since the beginning of the crisis, Lebanon receives its 1 millionth Syrian refugee. The UNHCR calls it a devastating milestone. On July 7, 2014, European Union Home Affairs Minister Cecilia Malmström calls upon Europe to take in more refugees, after only 100,000 have entered Europe, with more than 3 million in Syria's surrounding countries. Millions of men, women, and children steadily cross these borders time and time again. However, the flow increases during times of crisis. In late September 2014, heavy fighting in Kobani, Syria forced 200,000 people to cross the border into Suruc, Turkey. 150,000 people crossed within a span of 3 days. In 2014 as a whole, just 25,870 people sought asylum in the United Kingdom, and only 10,050 were accepted. June 20th, 2015, World Refugee Day. It was announced that there are over 60 million refugees in the world. September 9th, 2015, Europe is struggling to come up with a response for the thousands of refugees knocking at their doors. European Union member states agreed in principle to resettle 160,000 refugees, but failed to reach a consensus on which countries would take them in. As of February 2016, the United Nations has identified 13.5 million Syrians requiring humanitarian assistance, of which 6.6 million are internally displaced within Syria, and over 4.8 million refugees are outside of Syria.
Over the past 2 years, the migrants have come to find the need to migrate to several different countries. Initially, the refugees were traveling to Syria's neighboring countries. These countries include Lebanon, Jordan, and Turkey. Turkey is the largest host country with 2,748,367 registered Syrian refugees. Lebanon following with 1,048,275 registered refugees, and Jordan, which as of May 16th has 651,114 registered Syrian refugees. Oftentimes, the refugees would simply walk across the borders from their hometowns. These treacherous journeys often take months for many families. More recently, however, Syrians have also begun to take refuge in European countries. These countries include Austria, Hungary, Germany, France, Finland, Greece, and the United Kingdom, Germany being the most welcoming to the refugees. In order to reach each of these countries, however, the Syrians' journeys have become increasingly treacherous. The migrants are forced to fit into small rafts, with few life jackets readily available and boats far too small for the number of refugees. It is not only a dangerous journey, but it has become deadly. Smugglers charge refugees as much as $1,800 apiece for the 1 to 2 hour journey it takes to cross the sea to Lesbos, a small Greek island just 6 miles off Turkey. The once picturesque island, with its stone streets and olive groves, has been transformed, with thousands of discarded life jackets cluttering the rocky beaches, deflated rubber rafts hugging the shore, Refugees trudge for miles on the winding dirt roads into town, hoping to register with Greek authorities before venturing on to another country they are hoping will accept them. 2,000 refugees arrive daily along the northeastern coast of Lesbos, according to the International Rescue Committee. It is a measure of their desperation that the refugees are still braving uncertain waters to reach Europe, despite growing roadblocks along their journey and the threat of drowning that has claimed thousands of lives over the past 2 years. But the issues don't end there. Each country faces its own issues when it comes to room for the refugees, both physically and economically. As more and more refugees flee their homes, less and less space is available in the countries where they are arriving. When they arrive in the countries, the migrants apply for asylum. Granting asylum means giving someone permission to remain in another country because of risk of persecution. In the refugees' case, they are applying for asylum on the basis that they have been persecuted or fear they will be persecuted on account of race, religion, nationality, and/or membership in a particular social group or political opinion. Being granted asylum for these refugees means being given the opportunity to start their life again, that fleeing their beloved home was worthwhile because it led them to safety. Since the start of the Syrian uprising, the acceptance rate for people applying for asylum in the European Union has steadily increased from around 25% in the second quarter of 2011 to roughly 46% in the second quarter of 2015. Around the world, the percentage of asylum applications that are being accepted are going up in an effort to help the Syrian refugees. However, for those countries, the cost of helping is often more than what the country can afford. In Europe alone, the total proportion of migrants likely to qualify for asylum rises to well over 70%. According to the Asylum Information Database, each asylum seeker in Britain gets a mere €37 to live on, not usually allowed to work to supplement this sum. Asylum seekers in France receive up to €57 a week. Germany and Sweden, the two most popular migrant destinations, pay €35 and €37 a week respectively. Though this does not seem like much, taking into account the sheer number of refugees, over 4.8 million, each year accounts for these countries. In Greece, 1 in 4 people is unemployed. This means the infiltrative migrants coming to Greece's shores are not always wanted. The more people come and the more people are granted asylum, the harder it is for already Greek citizens to find work. So what are the countries doing? Though they are still taking in refugees, many solutions have been come up with as a way of distributing the refugees to the countries that have previously agreed to take them in. The 148 states that have signed the 1951 Convention relating to the status of refugees and the 1967 Protocol have in principle agreed to take in refugees fleeing persecution. The 1951 Convention, as a post-Second World War instrument, was originally limited in scope to persons fleeing events occurring before January 1, 1951, and within Europe. The 1967 Protocol removed these limitations and thus gave the Convention universal coverage, meaning that the 148 states agreeing to the 1967 Protocol have a binding document expressing their responsibility to take in the fleeing Syrian refugees, as well as a binding document expressing the right of the refugees that they will be provided when they enter the country. These rights include the right not to get sent back to their countries, not to be punished for illegally entering countries that signed the treaty, the right to housing, the right to work, access to education, access to public assistance, access to courts, and the right to get identification and travel documents. At the same time, however, many countries who have signed the treaty have no way of providing for all the refugees knocking at their doors. So what do? They come up with solution after solution until they're in their utopia, a safe environment with a strong economy and a nationwide acceptance for the country's newest citizens. So what solutions have been come up with thus far? In August 2015, Germany announced a plan to spend nearly $6.7 billion to provide for the influx of nearly 800,000 refugees they were expecting to arrive in the coming months. Following that, in early September 2015, countries along the route of the Balkans to Germany simply disregarded their borders, allowing refugees to either enter the country and apply for asylum or exit at the other end of the country, continuing on their route. Later that month, Hungary sent 100 buses to transport refugees from its capital, Budapest, to the Austrian border. as a way of speeding up the process. The Finnish Prime Minister also offered his home to the refugees, encouraging citizens to do so as well. And in September of 2015, a new plan was released from the European Union to relocate 160,000 refugees from Greece and Italy, distributing them to each European Union member country based on economic strength, population, unemployment rate, and number of approved asylum applications in the last 5 years. Based on these criteria, 11 countries will be required to meet their asylum quotas, while 14 countries will need to accept more asylum applications. That same month, Britain also pledged to take in thousands more refugees, promising to focus on those who are stuck in refugee camps of neighboring countries. In early October 2015, because only 147 refugees had been relocated in accordance with the European Union's plan to relocate 160,000, European leaders agreed to deploy hundreds of border guards to help manage the influx of migrants in Greece. At the same time, in an effort to slow down the migrant flow, Hungary announced that it would close its borders with Croatia. In response to this announcement, Slovenia announced its ability to take in more migrants after its addition of 12 reception centers with 7,500 beds for the refugees, and the ability to move 6,000 migrants a day into Austria. And most recently, in March 2016, the European Union announced its most recent solution, which entailed resettling one Turkish refugee in exchange for each refugee European Union countries have returned to Turkey, with Turkey accepting the return of all illegal immigrants to the European Union countries. Though these solutions have not yet ended the refugee crisis, they are an example of the worldwide effort to provide for these desperate people.
After reviewing the crisis, it is evident that a safe home for the refugees is far from found. Though an ideal solution would be the distribution of the migrants to the 193 countries that are members of the United Nations, past events have proven this not to be a viable solution. So what do? We look at what each and every refugee needs. Not the refugees as a whole, not the big picture, but each individual person. What are they missing that we can give them? They are missing clean water, food, shoes, bathrooms, toothbrushes, health assistance, safe environments for children to go play and go to school, and most of all, employment opportunities so that the adults have ways to provide for their families. So, though some things are easier to provide than others, the refugees are in dire need of all of them. Even those who are fortunate enough to be granted asylum and start their new life in a new country cannot do it alone. There are hundreds of organizations currently helping the refugees. The most notable include the UNHCR, UNICEF, Doctors Without Borders, Oxfam, the International Red Cross, and Save the Children. But these organizations cannot do it alone. As part of the United Nations, the United States has an obligation to provide humanitarian aid. Yet, only 1/6 of the 1% of the United States' nearly $4 trillion budget goes to humanitarian assistance. That is $6,666,666.67 to help the nearly 13.5 million Syrians requiring humanitarian assistance. The United States needs to change. With the overwhelming amount of resources available to the American people that the refugees are deprived of, the country has an obligation to help. Whether it be through military efforts to bring clean water to the refugee camps or the additional security we have the ability to provide, we mustn't sit back and watch this crisis occur. Though the United States has made a valiant effort in welcoming refugees, this process is too slow and therefore becomes ineffective. So while these people wait the nearly year and a half it takes to be granted asylum in the United States, we have an ability and an obligation to provide them with the safety they need and the sustainable lifestyle they dreamt of when fleeing their war-torn country.